Hello everyone, so today we're going to be painting a very quick and easy Plague Knight. What I'm going to do is I'll put the paints that you will need up in the top left hand corner, and I'll put the artwork up in the top right so you can try and match that closely with the artwork. But really what we're doing today is a very quick, very simple, beginner friendly rusted armor tone. So to get started with that, what I will need is Ryox hide. So what I'm going to do is go with a small dry brush, get a little bit of paint on my brush. Now, I'm not doing a normal dry brush here, what I'm doing is a stipple, so I can use a normal amount of paint, and all I do is just dab all the armor with that brush. Make sure you are careful with this. It is only a thin model, even if it's made in quite decent resin, if it's printed in decently strong resin, there's always that risk that you might snap a small part by being overzealous. So while it might look like I'm pressing on the mini as I'm doing my stippling, I'm being fairly gentle. Don't worry about the backs of the wings just yet, or up in the armor plates on the back there, we'll be getting to them later. But we're not going to allow that to dry before we go on to our next paint. And we're going to go straight in with Mournfang Brown. Same thing. Get a little on our brush. Now I haven't cleaned my brush between applications of this, but all we want to do is do this in quite a blotchy and quick stipple on. Then we're going to clean our brush off. So cleaning a dry brush, I recommend a microfiber cloth. It works a hell of a lot easier and pulls out a hell of a lot of paint quick. And while that Mournfang Brown is still drying, I'm going to go to a very small amount of Trollslayer Orange. So don't get too much of this on your brush. We only want a very thin layer, but now we just stipple again in random areas along the mini. And at the minute, it should look a bit rubbish. But it's alright, because we're going to correct that soon. I'm going to go back to a dab of Mournfang Brown, and then mix between those two colours on the model, and then back to a dab of Ryox hide, and once again blend on the model. And what we're doing with this stippling is we're actually wet blending the paints. What wet blending is using one paint to blend with and mix into another on the model rather than on your palette. Then we'll go back to a little bit of Mournfang and back to our orange. I have to take that from the palette there. And one more time, back to our darkest colour. So now we've got a lot of blotchy, different rust colours going on. Try and make sure you do hit the majority of the armour that you can reach with the little dry brush. But if you do miss any areas, it's alright. So we'll leave that to dry and be back when it has. So as that's beginning to dry now, what I'm going to do is switch over to some Rakarth flesh and paint the wings. You can just get this straight from the pot. If you've got a wet palette, store a bit on there. If not, you can just go straight to the mirror. With the Rakarth straight from the pot. For me, I'm just going to use it watered down a little. So with that Rakarth drying off now, I'm going to go from the pot and fill in that base layer. I quite like doing a watered down initial layer of a skin tone paint that I'm going to use. That's personal preference. I feel like it helps the paint cover a little better and adhere to the model. But if you just want to go straight from the pot, rather than establishing that watered down layer first, go for it. So at the minute, including drying times, this model has taken about 10 minutes. It's going to be a very fast, very quick model for us to do. It's also quite a nice way of getting yourself into learning how to do rust. So clean off your brush. And we'll let the whole mini dry. We're back in a couple of minutes. So now that the browns and oranges have dried, I'm going to move over to lead belcher. Now for this next step, choose a brush that is probably about ready to be thrown out. It makes a very good, very small detail dry brush, which is what we're going to do next. So I need a little bit of lead belcher on my brush. So I'm just getting rid of it on the edge of the edge of the paint pot there. And then all I start to do is just stipple and lightly dry brush that silver on. So if I just show you there, you can see where you're starting to have a lot of that coverage. Show you how that looks down here. Oh, looks like I'm running out of paint. Get a little bit more. Make sure I don't have too much on the brush. I had too much on the brush. Whoops. And onto the arms there. The reason why I'm using a very small brush for this, and one that I don't particularly care about, is that I can be a little rougher with it. It's not going to damage the mini. And in particular with a mini that is on the thinner side, you want to make sure you're not damaging it. So, go around a couple of times on the mini, build up a few layers of that. We want rust just peeking through. So go around your mini and we'll be back when that's done. So I've just come back a second while I'm in the middle of laying down those base tones to show you that while I'm adding that lead belcher, if I get to a stage that I'm happy with it and I find that, yep, I think that looks quite rusty, I like it quite a lot, I'll leave it there. For me, I want a bit less corrosion, I want a bit less brown showing through, so I'm going to continue with my dry brush. And I want a lot of that initial base layer to actually be covered. So this will take a couple of passes with the dry brush. Take your time, be patient with it. Like I say, the whole mini is probably only going to take you about 30 minutes anyway, if that. So it's not like it's going to be a big time investment. Now, the other good thing about using an old brush is that you can get into all these areas where maybe a primer didn't reach, stuff like that, and get a proper layer down, particularly up under the wings here. That's quite difficult for your dry brush to reach and quite difficult for your primer to reach because of the wings. So just keep tagging all those where you want heavier Silver's coming through. And not as much browns and oranges. Let's keep going and we'll be back when we're happy with it. So I'm now getting to a stage where I'm happy with the metallics, and what I'm going to do now is darken them down with a wash of Targor Rage Shade. So you can use that same brush that you've been doing the dry brushing with. Make sure that the paint layer is dry before you add any washes, as you don't want the paints to run. We're just going to go straight from the pot and apply quite a heavy wash of Targor Rage Shade. So we don't want to hit the wings, but we'll go over all the armour, and we'll be back when all that is covered and dry. So just going back to that cape for a second while we are waiting for that Targor Rage Shade to dry, and I think on the artwork that looks like an off blue, so we are going to go with Gryph-Charger Grey straight from the pot and just paint that along the cape to give us this nice off blue effect. Put quite a heavy wash on. Make sure to get under the wings as well. So wait for that to dry, then put a second coat over the top, and we'll be back when that second coat is dry. So as that second coat of Gryph-Charger Grey is finishing off drying, I'm going to go back to the armour as that has now dried and go to a wash of Fugan Orange. So with this, I'm going to go back to my standard size brush. I just want little amounts of this, not very much at all. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick out a couple of areas where I want there to be a little more rust. If you put on a bit too much, don't worry about it, you can just spread it around a little. It's going to look really bright initially, but it does die down. Do some of that coloration. But if you are a bit worried that you put a bit too much on, just clean off your brush, make sure it's dry, and lift the paint back out. Or you can get quite a heavy wash of it and dab it onto an area to really make it look rusted. So I'm going to do the same all the way around the helmet, leave the faceplate there. The head of the polearm as well. Bit of the polearm's handle, and I'm just picking out random spots where I want that rust to show through. So I will leave that to dry and it will be back when it does. So with all of those washes and contrast paints dry, that is our Plague Knight complete. Now there are two things that you can do at this stage. The first one is darken up the cloak a little more with a wash of Talgor Raid Shade. I won't be doing this, I'm quite happy with the robes as it is. What I will be doing though is the other optional step of applying a matte varnish to my miniature. So I would recommend Colourforge's matte varnish spray for this, but any matte varnish will do, either spray or brush on. So I'm going to be back in a moment when I varnish that miniature down, and we'll see how that affects how it looks. So this is that end result of a matte varnish. Everything just goes a little bit duller, which I think works really nicely for rusted and corroded miniatures. It also, for me, seems to bring out those highlights a little more in a way that a gloss varnish doesn't. That is my own personal opinion. I feel that a matte varnish is, in 9 times out of 10, better than a gloss varnish, but you know, people have their own opinions on that. Feel free to let me know in the comments below what you think about the matte versus gloss varnish debate, and also if you enjoyed this tutorial and if you'll be following along for your own Plague Night. If you'd like to keep discovering more about the lore of Trench Crusade, click the links on screen to continue your journey on the channel. And if you would like to purchase any of the paints used in this video, please consider checking out my affiliate links below. It really helps out the channel. And if you would like to support my work in a different way, please consider a like, subscribe, joining as a channel member, or sharing a favourite video with a friend. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all soon.